Welcome to the Gay Wellness Podcast. My name is Darren Main, and in this podcast, we talk to healers of every different background that are doing important work to lift gay men up and help them go on a journey of self-discovery and healing and wellness. Today, I'm with Emmett Patton, and he is a yoga teacher based in Los Angeles, and he also created sort of a spiritual community in the Los Angeles area, and perhaps beyond. I think you're online too, Emmett?
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah.
And we're online and in person. Yeah.
Awesome. And it's sitdownandbreathe.com. All one word is your website. And I'm going to post links to everything in the show notes, my work, your work, and how people can get in touch with you and me and get more involved. So, Emmett, it's so good to meet a fellow yoga teacher. I feel like we're close, even though. Can Northern Californians and Southern Californians get along? Can we really be friends?
Yeah, I think we can elevate beyond the rivalry.
Okay, we're going to take it to a new level.
Yeah.
I wonder, before we dive in, our topic is going to be creating a queer holistic space. But I'm wondering if we could just hear a little bit more about you beyond yoga teacher. That everybody in LA is a yoga teacher, right? So
yeah.
What makes you unique and special? And tell us just a little bit about your community.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for the introduction and thanks for having me here. So again, my name's Emmett, and I am a yoga teacher and a meditation teacher, but I am so much more than that too. I'm a musician, I'm an athlete. I've had a number of different careers over the years. And so I feel like I've sort of acquired a lot of different skills. And I've learned to kind of like develop and access these different parts of myself. And so I consider myself to be just like everybody, a really multifaceted person. And I think one of the things that I'm trying to do with the Sit Down and Breathe community is help people to tap into the various parts of themselves and really learn more about who they are as individuals and really access all of the different parts of their being.
Nice. Well, I'd love to hear a little bit about Sit Down and Breathe. I mean, it seems like the motto for all yoga in a way, but you're putting an interesting spin on it. And I'm wondering if you could talk about what exactly that is and how gay men in particular might be interested.
Yeah, absolutely. So Sit Down and Breathe is a queer-focused alternative conscious community. And so our mission really is to create dynamic and multifaceted spaces where gay men and other queer folks can come together and find really like joyful and fulfilling connections. And we do that by offering a variety of different things. So everything from yoga and meditation to like health and movement and like physical wellness. We also are offering some music and art and creative offerings as well. And the idea is really that when we talk about wellness, it's a word that gets used a lot and people are familiar with. But one of my beliefs is that wellness includes all of the aspects of our being. So your physical self, your emotional self, your social self, your intellectual self, your spiritual self. And I think that there are a lot of pre-existing spaces that do a really good job of addressing each of those parts individually. So, you get your physical needs met by going to the gym or exercising, and you get your social needs met by being with friends and going to bars and clubs and parties, and you get your intellectual needs met, hopefully through your work and through, conversations with interesting people. But there aren't very many spaces that are really integrating all of those things together and giving folks an opportunity to come together in community and tap into all of those different parts of themselves. So that's what we're trying to do with nice. Sit Down and Breathe.
I love what you're trying to do because this is sort of my observation. I think many queer people, gay men and other queer people, have sort of been pushed out the door, not feeling particularly welcome in whatever location we hail from. And we sort of create community around the most unhealthy, unconscious aspects of society. Going to a bar, for instance. I have no problem going to a bar, but I mean, it seems like there's not a lot of spaces where we can take it deeper. And I love that you're doing that. I have a question for you because I find that we all use words differently. And so when we use the word queer, obviously that can mean different things to different people. For some people, it's a more political word. For some people, it's a more inclusive word rather than using the litany of letters associated with our community, LGBTQ plus and whatever letters I'm not up to date on yet. I'm wondering what that means to you. What does it mean to be queer?
Yeah, it's a really interesting question, and I think it's an important one. I think for me, when I use the word queer, it's intended to be an inclusive word. It's intended to include all of those letters that you mentioned, so the LGBTQIA plus community. But ultimately, I think it just kind of means like anyone who feels like they don't fit inside like the normal box of what society considers to be an acceptable identity. And so I'm gay. And so as a member of that community, that feels like the most present thing for me. But there are also folks in the community who maybe don't identify as gay. Maybe they identify somewhere in the middle, or their definition of their own identity is a little bit more fluid or a little bit less defined. And I think if you're someone like that, it can be hard to find community, and it can be hard to find people that you connect with and that share the same experiences as you. And so using the word queer to me feels like a way of inviting in everybody who sort of exists on like the sort of fringes of society. And so I always say, you know, there's power in coming together with people who are like you, but I think there's also real healing to be had by coming together and connecting with people that may not be exactly like you. And that like, even though the specifics of our lives and the things that have led us to be the people that we are may be different, when we get down to the core of our humanity and like our raw emotions and feelings, like those are universal. And that's the level that I want to encourage people to connect with each other on.
One of the things when we were talking before we started recording was, what are we going to talk about? And you had this brilliant idea about creating queer holistic spaces, or holistic queer spaces. Some combination of those three words. And I'm wondering, like, just as you sort of defined, I think in years gone by, it would have been easy to, a space is a place where we gather, like a physical space. But now, of course, we have Zoom and other ways of connecting that are not necessarily physical. And then there's the word holistic, which most people, I think of as like going to Whole Foods and eating whole grains and taking supplements or whatever. I'm wondering what you envision as a modern version of like a holistic space for queer people. Like what does that look like? And is it different today than it was, say, 10 years ago?
Yeah. Well, yeah, I think you're right to call out that each of those words can kind of mean different things to different people. So when we say space, eventually our long-term goal with Sit Down and Breathe is to establish like a physical presence, like an actual building where people can come together and where we can host the, you know, events and serve all of the offerings that we have, and make it feel like a real community-oriented space where different types of people are passing through, and we're kind of hosting workshops and events with lots of other facilitators and other queer healers and teachers. But also, you know, in our modern world, you know, you mentioned Zoom and like having an online presence, that's a space as well. And so some of the offerings that we're putting on now are sort of hybrid. So I've been hosting things in person and then some things online. An example is I host a bi-weekly queer meditation circle. And so there are people in Los Angeles who are coming in person, and then I'm also running an online version of it so people can join from online. So sort of logistically speaking, there's different ways of understanding space, but I think also just more broadly, like when I talk about creating a space, it's also about sort of like the energy, and it's about like creating an environment for people that they feel that they can step into, that feels safe and that they feel familiar with. And it's a space, here I am using the word space again to define space, but it's about the environment, and it's about the other people that you're bringing together. And it's about creating a container for people to dive into themselves, explore themselves, to be vulnerable, to connect with other people. So there's this sort of like more amorphous way of understanding space as like something that you're stepping into to have an experience.
Yeah. I've been musing about this in recent years. I teach yoga in a giant cathedral in San Francisco every week. And I have people come up to me all the time and say, I can't believe I'm in a church. They're atheist, agnostic, or they feel unwelcome in that space, but yet the yoga sort of welcomes them in. And I feel like you're doing something very similar. I feel like when people started to leave organized religion, I mean, they're really hurting right now. There's hardly anyone going to church anymore or synagogue. And there's a variety of reasons, I think, especially in the queer community. But I think that we lost something, that idea of coming together, not to make money, not to do something, but to sit and to be together and to feel safe together and to be vulnerable together. And when people started leaving spiritual communities, they lost that. And I feel like one of the things you're doing is helping to replace that with something that is more inclusive. The downside to churches is many of them were not very inclusive. So,
sure. Yeah.
Now go, please run.
Oh, I just had a couple of responses to that. It's sort of taking me into different directions. So the first one is, there's this concept that you may be familiar with that some people may have heard about, which is called the third space. So if you think about like sort of the primary places where you exist in the world, your first space is your home. And then the second space is your work. And then there's a real need for like a third space, places where you can come together that isn't home or work, where you can be in community and you can connect with people. And there's a couple of sort of important elements to what creates and defines a third space. So the big one is that like a community is a part of it. It's a place where people can come together and engage in conversation. It's a place where everyone is sort of an equal. So there's no like authority figures. There's no sense of hierarchy really. And ideally there's like very little to no financial barrier to entry. And so a church, you mentioned a church, is an example of a third space. It's a real community space. But like you mentioned, there are some things about stepping into that space that might feel difficult for people or challenging, or that sort of conflicts with their sense of themselves, or if they don't consider themselves a religious person, that maybe it might be uncomfortable for them to be there. And so that's sort of one of the things that we're trying to do, is create one of these third spaces where people can come together and be in community and connect in a place that feels very relaxed and like there's no pressure and there's no requirements for entry. The other thing that made me think of while you were talking was the concept of spirituality, I think, can be a little bit intimidating to people. And, if you don't consider yourself a spiritual person or you don't have a spiritual practice, some of these things can feel a little bit inaccessible. I think of going to a yoga class, for example, and sometimes your teacher might be using this really like grand and esoteric language that is hard to understand. And one of the things that we really want to do with Sit Down and Breathe, and one of our core values, is like simplicity. So delivering the offerings in a way that feels really accessible and easy to understand. And that's actually where the name originates from. There's a story I'll quickly tell, if I could, about when I was in my yoga teacher training. We were in our group and we were standing up working on some kind of a standing pose, and the lead trainer finished with that, and he said, okay, so we're done with all of the standing work. We're going to come down to the floor now and do some work on some seated poses. And this person in the class very sort of like earnestly raised their hand and asked, okay, so if you were in front of a class and you had students in front of you, what would you say to get them to come down to the floor? What would your language be? How would you like gracefully guide them down to the floor? What would your sequence be? And he kind of just looked at them and he said, I would say, sit down. And that's just always stuck with me, because I think that really gets at the core of what we're trying to do, is like, ultimately, all you really need to do is just sit down and breathe. That's, it's really just that simple. You don't need to make the language like really complicated and elegant and beautiful. And you don't need to be this like super poised spiritual being. You can just deliver the teachings in a way that's like simple and human and easy to understand.
Yeah. You know, one of the things I like about your work, the more I've learned about you, is there are, and this is not a criticism, it's just different styles, but there are a lot of teachers out there who like to use Sanskrit words or, big lofty ideas that sound very mystical and mysterious. And like your work, from what I can see, is very sort of like bread and butter, sort of like sit down, breathe. It's like you're not trying to talk over anyone's head. You're saying, not only is this not mysterious, you can do it right now, here, this moment. Mm-hmm. And I think we really need that more now than ever. We don't need to be overwhelmed with big words, especially big words from a language we don't even understand. So I really appreciate that about you.
Yeah.
I have a question for you. I think there is this need for a queer space for everyone. And obviously, and we'll put this in the show notes for some of your online offerings, things that you and others in your community are doing. But there's a lot of people listening to or watching this podcast that don't live in Los Angeles, and they might want to create a holistic queer space in their own community, even if it's just a community of 2 or 3 people. I'm wondering if you have any thoughts or advice for what that might entail. I mean, they might say, oh, this sounds great, I want that, but I have no idea how to create it or find it or achieve it in my small town or way over here on the other side of the country. So any advice you have?
Yeah, I think there's a couple things. I think the first piece, I think, is just to start really small. I think it's easy to get caught up in the planning and the logistics and, getting ahead of yourself in terms of like trying to find somewhere to do the thing and, thinking about what the offering is going to be. And it's easy to kind of get lost in the planning process. And I think the best way to start is just like find something that makes you really excited, something that you're really passionate about, that you love, that you want to share with people. Maybe something that you already do on your own, that you feel like I could really build a community around just this one thing. And I would love to be surrounded by other people that also want to do this thing with me. So whatever your thing is that lights you up, whatever your gift is, you don't even have to be a teacher. It could be music or art or dance, or you could have like a particular topic that you love to talk about, that you want to have discussions about with people. Just choose the thing that excites you. And try to find a couple of people either in person or online that you feel would also be interested in that thing, and just try something. You could host something in your home. If you live in an apartment or a house, invite people to your home. Or if you want to reach people that aren't in your hometown, you can really easily create a little Zoom link and send it around to your friends, or make a post on social media and invite people, and just kind of try it out. And I think the thing that is going to draw people in is if they see that you're really passionate about it and that you're really excited about it. That's the thing that's going to attract the people that you want to be a part of your community. And so just, stay true to that. And then I think it can kind of just naturally build on itself.
I know that this podcast is going to live forever, or at least as long as the internet exists. And so some of how you answer this question might not be totally relevant, but just generally, how can people connect with you, both in person and online? I know, like, you're a yoga teacher. Do you teach online yoga classes, in-person yoga classes? If somebody wanted to sort of spend some quality time with you.
Yeah, absolutely. So I have a website. It's sitdownandbreathe.com. And on there, I've posted a calendar of all of the events and the offerings that are coming up. And I will be soon posting my schedule of classes. I teach yoga classes, group classes, in person at a couple of studios here in Los Angeles. And then I offer also the Queer Meditation Circle that I mentioned, that happens every other week on Tuesday nights. That's in person and online. So if you're not in Los Angeles and you want to join that, there's a Zoom link and you can find the information on my website. You can also check out my Instagram, sitdown.andbreathe. And I'm posting everything there as well. And
Nice.
I'll continue to add more online offerings as well, because I do want this to feel accessible to people that aren't in Los Angeles as well. So
I'm curious, just me being curious, because I do similar work. Do you find that you're getting more people in person, or are people still more online, or is it 50-50? Where do you see the trends going?
it's pretty mixed, which has been really cool to see. I mean, definitely there's people in person showing up, but I've had quite a few folks join online, and I love that. I love that, I can connect with people that I knew at other points in my life. I used to live in San Francisco as well, and I grew up in Boston, so I have a lot of friends on the East Coast in Boston and in New York, and I've seen a lot of familiar faces from those places joining online, and also some new people that I've never actually met in person or showing up to these online events, and it's a really cool opportunity for me to connect with new people and invite more people into the community. And I love to see new faces, so I would absolutely encourage everyone to join if they can and they feel called to. If you want to be a part of this community, we'd love to have you.
Well, I am excited. Next time I'm in Los Angeles, I'm going to take one of your classes. I'm super excited to practice with you. Or come back up to San Francisco and Berkeley, and we'll hang out up here.
Absolutely. Yeah, I love coming back up there.
And I would love to have you back on to chat about anything you want. I love what you're doing, and I'm just sort of excited. I feel I've like a really, ever since we started talking, have a really good feeling about this growing community that I think is off to a good start, but I think there's a lot of growth in the future. I think it's going to be a really good thing, especially post-COVID. So thanks for doing what you're doing.
Thank you. Yeah, happy to do it. And I would love to come back and continue the conversation.
Awesome. So again, Emmett Patton, his website is sitdownandbreathe.com, and you can get all the most current information on in-person and online things that are happening. I will post links to that and his Instagram feed and his gay wellness profile, so you can get in touch with him that way as well. I'll also put information about me and my work as a coach and a yoga teacher, a link to my website, which is darrenmain.com, and to my gay wellness profile and Instagram and Facebook, all in the show notes. Everything you need is in those show notes. So check that out wherever you're listening to or watching this. If you have any thoughts about future guests or topics, feel free to drop those in the comments. We'll also monitor the comments. If you have questions for us, you can reach out to us directly or drop something in the comments, and we'll do our best to respond that way. Emma, it was so fun chatting with you, and I'm so glad I feel like we're brothers somehow.
Yeah, I feel that too.
Maybe we were like brothers from a military experiment or something and separated.
Yeah, maybe. Maybe.
Though I have a feeling like I may have a few years head start on you. How old are you, brother?
I'm 34. I'll be 35 soon. So
yeah, definitely not twins. just a little bit older by 20
it's a little
years.
bit of an age gap, but age is just a number.
Honorary brothers. Anyway, my friend, thank you so much, and I will see you soon.
Of course. Thank you for having me. Good to chat with you.